I am very good at being busy. I would imagine that some of you can relate. I've been operating with busyness as my MO for many years. In high school and college, there were classes, and then homework and studying, then sports teams. I did cheerleading, then volunteering, playing the violin, and spending time with friends. Now I work a full-time job. I tutor students in test preparation after work. I volunteer at our church. I'm exploring a call to vocational ministry. I take photographs, and I spend time with my husband and friends. I even make vacations busy. My husband likes to point out to me that if there's a beach nearby, the only schedule that we need is to wake up, go to the beach, and then go to sleep. I, on the other hand, like to have a timetable for when and where all of my meals will be, and then fill in the spaces around that with planned hikes, time for reading several books, exploring areas that I haven't been before, etc., etc. The Fellows program really catered to my inherent desire to have a full schedule by pre-filling it all for me. I remember my initial phone interview with Morna Camo, who would become my Fellows Director in the Falls Church Fellows Program. She asked me if I would feel comfortable with a fast-paced schedule of working, Bible study, retreats, volunteering with the youth group, roundtables, classes, and seminars. I remember actually being confused by her question because it seemed so obvious to me. Of course I was comfortable with that. It's the only way that I knew how to schedule my time. And whether or not you too love the tightly packed Fellows schedule, you too have been living into that life of busyness over this past year. In the Fellows program, we discussed extensively the connection between work and worship, the way in which our work in any field can build up the kingdom of God. This is true and good. What is also true and good is that we can worship through abstaining from work, and in doing so can build up the kingdom of God. This is called Sabbath. To make sure we're all on the same page, let's talk about what I mean when I say Sabbath. I'm referring to the rest from work that we're called to do throughout the Bible, including in the Ten Commandments, in imitation of God, who rested on the seventh day of creation. The Sabbath is a time of joy and delight in God's provision, who gave the Israelites enough manna on the sixth day that they didn't even need to do the work of collecting manna on the seventh day in order to be fed. The Sabbath is not a concept limited to the Old Testament, but one that's expanded in the New Testament, where the book of Hebrews explains that through Jesus, we have a Sabbath rest that still remains for the people of God. For those who enter God's rest also cease from their labors, as God did from his. This rest that God invites us to join is in preparation for eternal, resurrected life with God, where our work and our rest go hand in hand, and both are worship to God. The specific activities that are indulged in or sustained from, or the time and day that the Sabbath occurs, is not what I'm concerned with here. Just as Jesus expands and transforms the law in so many other areas, I believe that the same is true of the Sabbath. It's a gift to be received whenever and however you choose to receive it, not a burden. It's a recognition of the present moment, like we were talking about earlier, that God has given us and that God inhabits with us. In my life now, Sabbath is a time of physical rest, Sunday afternoon naps, relationship building through spending time with my friends after church, and taking walks through Central Park with my husband. It's also a time of creativity through writing and poetry and music. During the Fellows program, because of the extensive pre-structured time, I did not have an opportunity to practice Sabbath. Honestly, though, I don't think I would have, even if I had had more control over my schedule. I didn't know how much I needed it yet. However, soon after the program ended, when I was still reeling with all of the information that I had taken in and the relationships that I had been building, I yearned for some time that was set aside for reflection and rest. So as I was starting divinity school, I decided that I wouldn't do any classwork or significant chores like laundry on Sundays. Instead, I would go to church and I would feel free to spend time with others without any pressure to get back to an essay or a task. After lingering in conversations with friends, I would come home and play my flute, journal, exercise, cook, nap, read for pleasure, and spend time with my roommate. For the first several months, this was very hard for me to do. I felt like I hadn't done enough by Saturday night to deserve to take a day off from my studies and tasks. I came to realize, however, that my thinking was totally backwards. Sabbath is not a reward that we earn. It's a devotion that God deserves. Just like salvation and grace and faith, Sabbath is a gift from God for us to receive. If we wait to rest until we've done everything that can be done, we would never rest. But God gives us rest anyway. Just like we don't deserve redemption and restoration, God gives them to us anyway. Some of you might be wondering how ceasing from work can be a means of worshiping God. To paraphrase from a wonderful book by Abraham Heschel, the Sabbath reminds us that the world has already been created, and it will continue to survive without our help. In other words, Sabbath reminds us that we are human and God is God. It helps us to put things back in order again. During the week as we work, even as we worship God in our work, we can be deceived into thinking that our work is actually holding the world together. Sabbath reminds us that even when we stop, God remains. Our work, our worship, and our rest is derivative from God's. So as you continue to discover more about your vocation and how God's kingdom is built through it, this weekend, this year, and in the years to come, I hope that you will likewise discover your vocation, your calling to Sabbath. Thank you.